Welcome to episode 2 of Three Simple Men Making Their Way Through the Galaxy. Today we have Star Wars Tales of the Jedi Season 1, Episode 2, Justice.
You know what? I gotta say it. Something about this episode, it had a deeper meaning and a powerful meaning that leads to events towards the second episode. And you see the early development of Dooku, which I truly can understand where he's coming from. Because when we saw him first in Attack of the Clones, it was hard to understand why someone like him would fall from the Jedi until you get into it. It was like, it's for him, it's about not abiding towards what the senators want him to do. It's him just acting as a true Jedi. Like, I'm trying to keep peace, not bowing to the senators' whims and stuff like that.
Definitely true.
He kind of says that he's loyal to the people, not to the Republic, or like loyal to the Senate. So yeah, that definitely resonated with me. And yeah, to your point, we don't really get too much of that backstory of like what happened to Count Dooku back in his Jedi days. And like this one, obviously there's like a couple episodes that go more into that, but I thought this was a really good starter for the first episode.
I do think we chronologically we might have already messed up, because I do believe this probably takes place before the first episode of Tales, because we watched the one with Ahsoka, and I just feel like timing wise and age wise, this is probably earlier, right? I would assume. Potentially. I mean, I would, I could be wrong. Who knows?
We could be, but we couldn't. Like, maybe.
Yeah. No.
Who knows? Yeah. To be honest. But I think this is a different aspect that we're seeing a young Dooku and a young Qui-Gon. And I just got to say, there is something about this episode between those two, and their connection is different that of ordinary master and apprentice, because I don't know if you guys noticed this, Qui-Gon being the apprentice didn't have the Padawan braid.
Oh yeah, and he still called him Padawan.
He was still the Padawan. He never had the braid. I think Dooku just wanted him to feel more of like himself in a way, to be true to himself, be one with the Force, with the people, to be a true Jedi in a sense, I think.
Interesting. I will say right off the bat, I felt like we did get, and we can go into the breakdowns again of the different things.
Of course.
But well, yeah, I mean, I guess I shouldn't jump ahead. Let's start at the beginning. So one of the first things we see this episode is in fact a vehicle. We see a ship.
Yep.
Dooku and Qui-Gon's ship. Didn't look too familiar. I don't know if we have a name for that ship. I don't think we do. I think it's a new one.
It's something that we'll have to look into, and that was kind of something that caught my eye too, because you would think like with the way episode 1, The Phantom Menace, opened up, it had a different kind of Republic cruiser, but that one was just like a model that you saw a lot in the Clone Wars. So like it kind of addresses this whole continuity, trying to go back and try and do that. But I did notice that was a different Republic cruiser.
Mm-hmm. And then the only other vehicle shows up much later in the episode. We do see the Senator's speeder. So we do get our first speeder in this episode too. Technically, so I guess chronologically speaking, if we're going to assume the Ahsoka one, we'll pretend the Ahsoka one's first. And then we have this one. I mean, this is our first chronological appearance of both a ship, a speeder, and a lot of things. This is the first time we see first lightsaber, which that scene I think is the big scene in this. Right in the beginning, Dooku comes in. I mean, they land on this planet that's obviously like dealing with stuff. They got like droids that I think they were like Astrotech droids, but like with the arms and legs working as like salvage droids. and which I feel like we've seen the same kind of style with the Astrotech that was in we'll see later on in the Mandalorian, right? The one that's like rowing the boat.
Yeah,
the
yeah. With the first lightsaber, I want to bring that back up. It's I think there's one, we finally know what Dooku's lightsaber was before he turned towards the dark side.
It was blue.
It's blue. But I think it's a power move for him when he walks in to the cantina and he places his lightsaber hilt on the table and he goes as a way of saying, I'm here for peace, but if you have to challenge me, I'm here.
It was a threat. I got it as a threat. I mean, it
I
made
did.
me think.
I truly did.
When I saw it, I was kind of like, "This is
It
the
kind of had
first."
like that Western vibe to it. Like sometimes, like when they'll come in, they'll put something on the table and like make themselves known to
Felt
everyone.
like it was the first inkling of his dark side. You know, that he does eventually fall to the dark side, and I thought that was one. It didn't seem very Jedi-like to come in and be like, "Oh, let me," not like, "Oh, we're here for peace," you know, we're here for negotiate. When we see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan in
Yeah.
Phantom, they're coming for peaceful negotiations is the idea, to the point where they let themselves get basically poisoned almost. And you get him, he just shows up for peaceful negotiations, and the first thing he does is he puts the cards on the table. He puts his lightsaber on and he's like,
Yeah.
"You're gonna do what I want, or I'm gonna chop you all up."
I mean, also they had kind of had blasters on them too, so it's like kind of had to do that move. So
they did. It was a little threatening though. And then you know, no,
I think in a sense, when he did that, Qui-Gon kind of followed him in a sense because he was well aware of what Dooku was doing in the situation at the bar or the cantina and stuff like that. They're just like checking their surroundings. They're like he's gonna follow his master. He doesn't know his intentions truly yet, but he's still following him, and he's just like they're all looking around.
before we move on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that was pretty much it.
I was gonna say, before we move on to the next big encounter, just to finish up that bar scene, one, we really don't get any establishing idea of if this planet is specifically occupied by a certain race. It doesn't seem like it is. It was very cantina-esque, where it was like Mos Eisley, where we had just a ton of different species on the planet, specifically in the bar. And then we do get a bartending droid, which I always love a good bartending droid.
Who doesn't?
And then what I found interesting, we also get animal-wise, we get a dog and a mouse. And
Yeah,
you don't call them anything else. The subtitles, when they made noises, said dog and mouse. So, and they didn't really look like any other different species than just an actual dog, an actual mouse. So, who knows? We don't get the name of the planet, I noticed. And then we finally move on from the bar to the prisoner, or the prison, with the senator's son, and we get that other droid that's like a I feel like, have we seen that droid in something else? That type of droid in
I mean, I feel like there probably was a variant in the Clone Wars, like Mandalore or like Concordia, like with like Ahsoka, and when she goes out to talk to Death Watch, I feel like it kind of reminds me of that a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was also like the like I don't know, it looked like a droid that was made like a farming droid, like to pick things up and put things down or something. Like it didn't look
Right.
like it had crazy weaponry or anything. It had a name. He called it. I wrote it down.
It's like two.
Um,
It's like 2 ton or
2 ton. Yep.
2 ton.
Yeah. So we had 2 ton. So again, that leads me to think that he's like just a droid that's made for like lifting things, like a farming droid. But then we move to the big scene. I'd say the appearance of the senator, knowing that the Jedi were there on a secret mission to negotiate, and that the senator wasn't aware. The character who we meet actually in the beginning when they first enter, who has the dog, we see her look at them through a door, then turns out to be the one that ratted everybody out for food. But we get the big climactic scene, which is our first appearances of not just the Force choke, but we also get the Force push, because Dooku pushes Qui-Gon away once he starts Force choking Senator Dagonet. Dagonet? Dagonet?
I mean, you could also tell that Dooku was also force pushing even before the choke happened, because like Qui-Gon was just mainly deflecting, and so was Dooku. But I think at one or 2 points he did use the force push before that moment happened.
Oh, during the actual fighting, I missed that. Good catch.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, and again, the Force choke. I mean, I kind of had that, and I'm getting way too ahead of ourselves. But like, I guess my thought is the Force choke a dark side move? I mean, it's considered to be one in some of the games.
But we've seen it with Luke in Return.
Luke does do a Force choke in Return of the Jedi, so it is a very interesting
I think it's a
tool that we see used.
I think this could be my hot take right now off the bat. It's like with the Force choke, it's not light side or dark side, depending on how far you're going with it. If you're just means to disable an enemy and you just let go once they're, unconscious, it's could be light, not really, but it's not you're trying to intentionally kill them, because, we've seen it at its maximum capacity in a certain movie that is called Rogue One, but we'll get to that later. No, it's hard because you can't differentiate, because it is a physical attack on someone. But we haven't seen it. Well, we've never seen it like I said, let me retract that. We've seen it with Luke, but at the same time, we never knew Luke in Return of the Jedi whether he was going to turn to the dark side or to the light side. So the Force choke is still up for debate whether it's I think it's a neutral power at the moment.
Well, I think being used by Dooku, I think it was not. I think in the usage here, again, I thought it was more his foreshadowing of him turning to the dark side, because he was ready to just kill this guy. And it wasn't until Qui-Gon kind of brought him back to the light and stopped him. Because I don't think if Qui-Gon wasn't there, I think Dooku would have killed, or not just Qui-Gon, sorry, but the Senator's actual son coming in, and kind of like snapping Dooku out of the rage. I mean, he was showing he was showing hatred for this guy. And I mean, you gave your hot take. I'll give the quote, which we mentioned earlier, but it comes up here, and it's the Senator says to Dooku, "You serve the Senate," and Dooku says, "No, we serve the people of the Republic." And talk about foreshadowing. I mean, I think that is definitely alludes to everything he kind of why he goes to the dark side. He realizes that, the Senate is corrupt, and obviously there's other trickery going on and manipulation to get him there, but clearly it starts with him having a great distrust of the Senate controlled Republic. So very interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like there was a different change like with like last week's episode, how it started off with like being this like clean planet full of life, but you didn't really get that this episode around. And obviously a lot had to do with the Senator and the way he was in there for such a long time. Like obviously I don't know if there are term limits for a senator, but clearly he's been around, he's been enriching himself, or like, he and his son are like probably they're the ones who are in the best shape out of everyone, where everyone's just like, it's hard to make out a living. And, we had broken down droids, the places where it was just a very different atmosphere. And yeah, I mean, just that probably helped Dooku tip over too. It's just like, well, why should I serve the Senate or serve the Republic if, they're treating their people that they serve like crap?
Yeah, I think to continue with you, Mike, from the first episode to now, what we just watched tonight, we saw the difference between when politics isn't involved to when politics is truly involved. That's when it gets a little cloudy. That's when the senators and the politicians will use the Jedi. And this is what causes I think what will lead to the distrust of the Jedi, because they're not truly the keepers of the peace. They're just what Dooku will say eventually is that they are the lapdogs of the Senate.
Now, do we get later on? Do we find out Ahsoka's planet to Groot, or at least the race to Gruddy, and the planet was Shilly? Is Shilly, is that are they a part of the Republic? Do they have like representation, or are they like Outer Rim? Like
I believe they do with Senator Farfrita.
I was gonna say, isn't there is somebody of that race?
I think their race is like a Torgula or
Togruti is the language. So Togrutu, I think, is the race, and then the planet they were on was Shilly. What Togruta, yeah. So, but that doesn't mean, there could be a Togruta senator that's from a different planet, technically, right? It doesn't have to be from that planet,
Yeah.
So I just wonder if we saw an early planet that wasn't part of the Republic that Ahsoka grows up on. Did you figure it out?
Not yet, but
No.
yeah, I kind of agree with Ryan. Again, it's a stark contrast between the first planet. There wasn't really a senator. You can't tell if it's really affiliated with the Republic, and just kind of just with Ahsoka's upbringing, whereas this one, it kind of exposes Dooku and just like his distrust for it. So I kind of get the feeling it's just two different environments and situations.
So we had Tom's hot take. We had my quote. Mike, do we have some insider information from you?
I did take a look briefly because like when Dooku first spoke, it kind of reminded me, is this the same Clone Wars actor that voiced Dooku in the series? And it was Corey Burton. And then actually found something interesting. The guy who voiced Qui-Gon, the younger version, was actually the real life son of Liam Neeson. So that was a pretty nice touch.
Oh, that's some good insight. I like that. Yeah, that's new. I didn't know that. Very good.
Yeah, just look it up just to see if there are any facts. Like, oh, it's like, wow, okay. It's like, but actually, like, speaking of like the Qui-Gon, like one of the things I kind of liked at the end of the episode was how Dooku recognized him. He said, "You're a much wiser man than I am." It kind of reminds me of like that final interaction between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan before the battle. So it kind of had that throwback, and probably because of that, maybe that I think Qui-Gon was the one who said it. You're a much wiser man than I am. Kind of like guess Obi-Wan had that situation where it kind of put some perspective into Qui-Gon and kind of what Qui-Gon did for Dooku, and I thought that was a pretty nice throwback to episode 1.
Yeah, now that you think about it, I guess the sign of a good teacher, right, is that the student kind of
teaches the master,
overpower, outshines the master.
Yeah.
And Dooku, you could say what you want, he ends up being bad, falling the dark side, but at the same time, his Padawan being Qui-Gon, he was clearly a good master, because Qui-Gon turned out okay. And then same thing with Qui-Gon was a good master because Obi-Wan turned out okay. And Obi-Wan a good master. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, we can get it. That's a discussion for
that's another discussion at this point.
Big debate to get into eventually. But
I do want to talk about something when I was watching during that showdown with Dooku and Qui-Gon with the senator and the weapons. I want to talk about the weapons a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Something about it seemed familiar for me. A part of me was just looking at them, and it had a slight remnants of I love history and stuff like that, and they kind of resembled an MP40 from World War II Germany.
The senator's weapons, the senator's guards, and then did you notice the senator had a pistol?
Yes.
He had a tiny pistol, and then the villagers all had rifles.
Yeah, because when I looked at the senator's guards with the I thought it resembled an MP40, because when we originally look at the original trilogy, the huge heavy machinery guns that the stormtroopers use, they were like, oh yeah, we dismantled a MG-34 from World War II. They've used World War II weapons in the movies, an original trilogy, that is. And it gave me that sense of like they're trying to just replicate it with a different type of weapon.
Yeah,
That's just me, but
definitely. And then the senators guards like uniforms too. They had like a very ornamental kind of military uniform that I'd say maybe reminded me of like some World War One era uniforms maybe. But yeah, definitely cool scene. I didn't write down all the different races I noticed in the I keep saying races, I should probably say species. In the cantina, but I know, and that fight scene, we had a fair amount. I mean, it seemed like the villagers were almost every single person was a different species. So that was kind of cool too, to get into that world. Because I mean, for me, Star Wars, like legendary Star Wars scene, of course, is the cantina scene where you first get brought in and you're seeing all these different creatures and characters that you've never seen before. And I mean, that's one of
you're seeing Duros.
all-time Star Wars moment for me is that cantina scene. And
Oh, it's
to see that kind of replicated here a little bit, always cool. And I'll always like that.
absolutely. First time we saw a lightsaber in ever in our entire lives is in that cantina in A New Hope. So,
and we don't just get the Dooku's lightsaber, we also get Qui-Gon's lightsaber. So we do get a blue lightsaber and a green lightsaber in
unchanged
this one.
Yeah.
what was that, Mike?
They mean relatively unchanged to what they have in the movies too, so that was pretty cool.
And it's gonna be funny. It's gonna be funny because later on, the colors are gonna reverse: green master, blue apprentice.
Good catch.
I gotta say, this was a very good episode, very powerful. You know, it gives us the introduction to Dooku. We get to see a young Qui-Gon. So it's just gonna be so much fun to keep going forward with this, you know, and just seeing how it leads off to episode 1 and how the galaxy is going to shape throughout all the movies, you know, especially with the prequel trilogy, you know.
Yeah, I'm definitely very excited to get to the first movie. You know, I do like that we're doing these first, but that's gonna be fun when we get to that, and then obviously going into the large amount of Clone Wars and all that too. So it'll make my quote job a lot easier because I'll probably just have to talk about what each episode starts with, and then we can digest that. But yeah, I think this was definitely a good second one, and yeah, it is powerful. I mean, it really is. The corruption, the shadows. I'll say the shadows of the dark side. That you're slowly starting to see kind of maybe a little corruption of it's funny, he's upset about corruption, but at the same time he's getting a little corrupt. So
in a sense, the wheels start turning, you know, like if you're a true Star Wars fan and you've seen everything, you know what's going to come off later, but this is awesome as an introduction of this is how it's starting to spin off into where it's going to lead.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys echoed really good comments there, and I know we touched upon this like throughout the video too, because like we talk about the episode being called Justice, and then questioning whether or not Dooku was justified using the Force choke, and I guess depending upon what perspective you have on it, I mean, how he got to justice. I mean, yeah, we could go back and forth about that all day, but they ultimately got the justice that they needed because with Qui-Gon's intervention, the sun stopping them, I mean, they were able to shed some light and Dooku questioned whether or not this would be, you know, a permanent solution for these people to get back to it, but they did get it, but at what cost? Obviously, Dooku slowly getting down to the dark side. So,
Well, technically, we don't even know if
very interesting name of the episode and dynamic with everything that happened. But I agree, a very powerful episode overall, and we'll
we
see.
don't know. We don't know if they got justice, Mike. Right? I mean,
Right.
all we really get at the end is the son promising that he's
Right.
going to.
We don't know what happens to the people there, but I mean, again, like we can go back and forth whether it was the right way to get it, but
And who's to say, later on, because we know who Dooku becomes later, it's just pretty much like he's saying he speaks for justice. But maybe later on that planet, we don't know, Dooku tries to take over as a separatist. You never know.
right.
Well, to go back to my quote that I took, I'm realizing now it's, his response was, no, we serve the people of the Republic. And this can be a debate we can have for a very long time, but it's interesting that he chooses to say that and that he believes he serves the people, but when he forms a separatist army, there aren't any people, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's mostly, besides the Trade Federation, which one could argue is a corporation, and then it's all his
Guild, Bank and Clan, pretty much all the big weapon corporations or affiliations.
but all his soldiers are droids, pretty much. I mean, eventually you get the builders and stuff, but it's a droid army. It's the absence of people.
I mean, we have about 7 minutes left, so we can debate it a little bit because I think in a way he'll always not only is he a great fighter, but he's also a good leader and a good speaker. In a way, he's very persuasive in a sense because I think in a way he could have just been trying to persuade the people like the clones only, when we get into the Clone Wars, he's going to find a way to say, well, the clones in the Republic, they just say they want to protect you, but they want to rule you. He's going to try to find a way to manipulate. Manipulate. I can't even say the word right now.
Manipulate.
Yeah.
Thank you. YouTube comments, be kind.
You can always edit that out.
But no, he's going to find a way to spin it.
But also too, I mean, obviously we'll see this more in the Clone Wars, but there was a separatist council. It was, it was made up of people, but you just don't see enough of that representation. To your point, Ryan, again, mainly with the droids, the corporate executives, all the profiteers who are going to benefit from the war. So yeah, we'll probably see that in more detail, and we can discuss more about the separatists during the Clone Wars arc.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think Dooku is a very dynamic character that, even when we'll get to him in the movies, but the just even the introductions to him originally, just in the movies, you're kind of like, is he a good guy? Is he the bad? Is he right? Is he wrong? You don't know. And then you find out that he's actually working for, so it's like, he's just a pawn, really, right? Or is he fully aware of what's happening? Is he not? Is he, very interesting character.
I mean, the quote,
a lot more into that discussion.
I'll be honest, with Dooku and the way he's acting and stuff like that, to quote Obi-Wan from Return of the Jedi, the truth is what we make it from one's perspective, in a sense like that. So it's a
certain point of view.
He's just preaching it from his point of view, his truth in a sense. And who knows, maybe he does make sense, and that's where we're leading up to. A lot of people will believe it.
Yeah, and I'll save some of my other comments for when we get to the movies where it's more relevant. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but yeah, definitely a lot of conversations to come regarding our buddy Dooku, and of course we'll get to see more Qui-Gon soon. One of the MVP Jedis in my opinion. So
absolutely.
All right. Yeah. With that, any other comments, or we'll wrap this episode up?
I thought it was like I said, fantastic episode, great discussion, and can't wait for the next episode, boys.
Yeah. Same here.